James, a white hiring manager, humiliates candidate Marcus in a demeaning job interview. Soon after, James is shocked when he finds out that the black man is actually the new CEO. How will James react when he realizes his huge mistake? James Cooper stood in front of his full-length mirror, adjusting his silk tie with practiced precision. His reflection showed a man in his prime, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, not a hair out of place. He allowed himself a small, self-satisfied smile. Today was an important day at Morgan & Associates, and James was ready to remind everyone why he was the top dog. James Cooper stood in front of his full-length mirror, adjusting his silk tie with practiced precision. His reflection showed a man in his prime, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, not a hair out of place. He allowed himself a small, self-satisfied smile. Today was an important day at Morgan & Associates, and James was ready to remind everyone why he was the top dog. As he smoothed down his jacket, James mentally reviewed the day ahead. A series of interviews with potential new hires was on the agenda, but more importantly, whispers around the office suggested that the new CEO announcement was just around the corner. James had no doubt he was the front-runner for the position. Time to show them what real leadership looks like, he muttered to himself, his voice dripping with confidence. James grabbed his leather briefcase and strode out of his penthouse apartment. In the elevator, he nodded curtly to a young woman who seemed intimidated by his presence. He felt a twinge of satisfaction at her discomfort. It was good to be respected, even feared a little. The chauffeur was waiting with the car as James exited the building. "Good morning, Mr. Cooper," the driver said, opening the door. "Morning, Johnson," James replied dismissively, sliding into the back seat without a second glance. As the car glided through the city streets, James scrolled through his phone, reviewing the resumes of today's interviewees. He scoffed at some of the applications. "Fresh out of college, thinks they can change the world," he muttered, shaking his head. "They'll learn soon enough." The car pulled up to the imposing glass building that housed Morgan & Associates. James stepped out, his chest puffing up slightly as he gazed at the company logo. This was his domain, and soon it would be official. In the lobby, employees scurried out of his way, offering hurried good mornings. James barely acknowledged them, his mind already on the day ahead. He strode into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. As the doors closed, James allowed himself another smile. Today was going to be a good day. He could feel it in his bones. Little did he know, the universe had other plans in store for James Cooper. Marcus Williams took a deep breath as he stepped out of the taxi in front of the imposing glass building of Cooper & Associates. He straightened his tie and smoothed down his well-worn but neatly pressed suit. It wasn't the fanciest outfit, but it was the best he had, and he wore it with pride. "You've got this, Marcus," he whispered to himself, a small smile playing on his lips. Despite the butterflies in his stomach, there was a spark of excitement in his eyes. This interview was a big opportunity, and he was determined to make the most of it. As he walked through the revolving doors into the lobby, Marcus couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed by the grandeur of the place. The marble floors gleamed, and well-dressed people bustled about with purpose. For a moment he felt out of place, but he quickly shook off the feeling. He belonged here just as much as anyone else. Marcus approached the reception desk, his head held high. "Good morning," he said warmly to the receptionist. "I'm Marcus Williams. I have an interview scheduled for 9:30. The receptionist looked up, her expression softening at Marcus's friendly demeanor. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. Please take a seat, and someone will be down to escort you shortly." As Marcus sat in the plush waiting area, he pulled out a worn leather folder containing copies of his resume. He glanced over the pages, a sense of pride washing over him. Each line represented years of hard work, determination, and overcoming obstacles. His journey hadn't been easy, but it had made him who he was today. Marcus's mind wandered to the challenges he might face in the interview. He knew that sometimes people made unfair judgments based on appearance or background, but he also knew his own worth, his skills, and the unique perspective he could bring to the company. A young man in a crisp suit approached him. "Mr. Williams, I'm here to escort you to the interview room." Marcus stood up, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Thank you. I appreciate it." As they walked towards the elevator, Marcus took in the bustling office around him. He could see himself working here, contributing his ideas and making a difference. The thought filled him with renewed determination. In the elevator, Marcus took another deep breath, centering himself. He thought of all the people who had supported him, believed in him, and the hard work he'd put in to get to this moment. No matter what happened in the interview, he knew he had already overcome so much. The elevator doors opened, revealing a sleek corridor lined with meeting rooms. Marcus stepped out, his heart beating a little faster, but his resolve stronger than ever. He was ready to show Morgan & Associates exactly what Marcus Williams was capable of. Marcus entered the interview room with a confident stride, his head held high. The room was spacious and well lit, with a large mahogany desk dominating the center. Behind it sat James Cooper, his eyes narrowing as he took in Marcus's appearance. "Mr. Williams," James said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Please have a seat. I hope you didn't have too much trouble finding our upscale location." Marcus felt a slight sting at the implication, but maintained his composure. He sat down, placing his folder neatly on his lap. "Not at all, Mr. Cooper. It's a beautiful building." James leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "I'm surprised you made it on time. I hear public transportation can be quite unreliable in certain areas." Marcus took a deep breath, pushing down the hurt and anger bubbling up inside him. He knew he had to stay professional, no matter how unfair the situation felt. "I actually took a taxi, sir. I believe in always being punctual." "How resourceful of you," James replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. He glanced down at Marcus's resume, his eyebrows raising in mock surprise. "I see you attended a state college. How quaint. I'm sure it was adequate for your needs." Marcus felt his heart sink. He had worked incredibly hard for his degree, often juggling multiple jobs to pay for his education. But he refused to let James's words diminish his accomplishments. "It was an excellent school, Mr. Cooper. I learned a great deal there." James waved his hand dismissively. Yes, I'm sure. Now tell me, Mr. Williams, how do you think you could possibly fit into our prestigious company culture? We have certain standards here, you understand." The implication was clear, and Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. He had faced discrimination before, but never so blatantly in a professional setting. Still, he straightened his shoulders and looked James directly in the eye. "Mr. Cooper, I believe my skills, experience, and unique perspective would be valuable assets to your company," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. James leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Mr. Williams, let me be frank. This company has a certain image to maintain. We can't just hire anyone off the street." The tension in the room thickened like a heavy fog, making the air feel almost suffocating. Marcus sat up straighter, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their slight trembling. James, on the other hand, seemed to relish the discomfort he was causing. "So, Mr. Williams," James drawled, his eyes scanning Marcus's resume with exaggerated skepticism. "I see you've held quite a few interesting positions. Tell me, how does being a community outreach coordinator prepare you for a role in our esteemed company?" Marcus took a deep breath before answering. "Sir, that role taught me valuable skills in communication, problem-solving, and—" "Problem-solving," James interrupted with a snort. "What kind of problems? Deciding which charity case to help next?" Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm, but he kept his voice steady. "Actually, we dealt with complex issues affecting entire neighborhoods. It required strategic thinking and—" "Strategic thinking," James mocked, rolling his eyes. "I'm sure it was very challenging. Now, let's talk about your qualifications. Or should I say, lack thereof." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had worked tirelessly to build his career, overcoming countless obstacles along the way. To have his achievements dismissed so callously was deeply painful. James leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "You see, Mr. Williams, we have very high standards here. We don't just let anyone walk in off the street and claim they're qualified for a leadership position. I assure you, Mr. Cooper, my qualifications are— Your qualifications? James interrupted again, his tone sharp. A degree from a no-name school and a string of feel-good jobs? Please. This isn't some charity organization. We're a serious business. Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. He had faced discrimination before, but never so blatantly in a professional setting. Still, he refused to let James see how much his words were hurting him. Mr. Cooper, Marcus began, his voice quiet but firm, I understand you have concerns about my background, but I can assure you that my experiences have prepared me well for this role. If you'd allow me to explain— Explain, James scoffed. What's there to explain? It's all right here in black and white. Or should I say, just black. The racist implication hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Marcus felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. He stared at James, shock and hurt warring with anger in his chest. Marcus took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He could feel his heart pounding, but he refused to let James see how much his words had affected him. With a calm he didn't quite feel, Marcus met James's gaze steadily. Mr. Cooper, he began, his voice level and professional, I understand your concerns. However, I believe my diverse experiences have given me a unique perspective that could be valuable to this company. James scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Unique perspective? Is that what they're calling it these days? Marcus ignored the jab, pressing on. In my previous roles, I've led teams through challenging projects, increased efficiency by 30%, and developed innovative solutions to complex problems. And I'm sure you did it all with a smile and a song, James sneered. Tell me, Mr. Williams, do you really think you can handle the pressures of a real job? The insult was clear, but Marcus refused to rise to the bait. Instead, he smiled politely. I've faced many pressures in my career, Mr. Cooper. I believe in staying calm under stress and finding solutions rather than dwelling on problems. James's eyes narrowed. That's a pretty way of saying you don't have the backbone for tough decisions. On the contrary, Marcus replied, his tone still respectful despite the growing hostility. I've made many tough decisions. For example, in my last position, I had to restructure an entire department to meet new industry regulations. It wasn't easy, but we came out stronger and more efficient. Restructure? James laughed harshly. Let me guess, you held hands and sang Kumbaya while you were at it? Marcus felt a flare of anger, but he pushed it down. Actually, sir, it involved difficult conversations and some hard choices. But by treating everyone with respect and dignity, we maintained morale and productivity even during a challenging transition. James rolled his eyes. Respect and dignity, how quaint. This isn't a feel-good seminar, Mr. Williams. This is business. I'm well aware of that, Mr. Cooper, Marcus said, his voice firm but still polite. And I believe treating people well is good business. It leads to higher productivity, better retention, and a stronger company culture. Throughout the increasingly hostile interview, Marcus maintained his composure. He answered each question thoughtfully, providing concrete examples of his skills and achievements. Even as James's behavior became more blatantly discriminatory, Marcus refused to stoop to his level. He held on to his dignity, determined to show his worth through his actions and words. As the interview continued, the tension in the room grew palpable, seeping through the walls and into the surrounding office space. Employees passing by couldn't help but overhear snippets of James's harsh tone and Marcus's calm responses. Sarah, a young marketing assistant, paused near the door, her eyes widening as she caught James's latest barb. She turned to her colleague Tom, who was organizing files nearby. "Can you believe what's going on in there?" she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief and concern. Tom shook his head, frowning deeply. "It's awful. I've never heard James be so blatant before." As more employees began to notice the commotion, small groups formed around the office, their hushed conversations centered on the unfolding scene. "Poor guy," muttered Rachel from HR, her face etched with sympathy. "No one deserves to be treated like that, especially in an interview." Her co-worker, David, nodded in agreement. I'm impressed by how he's handling it, though. I don't think I could keep my cool if someone was talking to me like that. The whispers spread like wildfire through the office. Employees exchanged worried glances and shook their heads in disapproval. Many felt a mix of anger towards James and admiration for Marcus's composure. Should someone do something? Melissa from accounting asked nervously, glancing towards the closed door of the interview room. Like what? Replied Mike, her desk mate. James is the boss. Who's going to stand up to him? The atmosphere in the office grew increasingly uncomfortable as the interview dragged on. Productivity slowed to a crawl as more and more employees found themselves distracted by the situation. I hope that poor man files a complaint, Jenny from legal said softly. What James is doing in there, it's not just unprofessional, it's discriminatory. As the whispers continued, a sense of solidarity began to form among the employees. Many expressed their hope that Marcus would somehow come out on top, impressed by his resilience in the face of such blatant hostility. Marcus stepped out of the interview room, his shoulders slightly slumped but his head held high. The office had grown eerily quiet, with employees pretending to be busy at their desks. As he made his way to the elevator, he could feel their sympathetic glances following him. Once outside the building, Marcus took a deep breath of fresh air. His hands were shaking slightly as he pulled out his phone. He needed to hear a friendly voice, someone who believed in him. Without hesitation, he dialed his sister's number. "Hey, Lisa," he said, his voice cracking a little. "You got a minute?" "Of course, big brother," Lisa replied, concern evident in her tone. "How did the interview go?" Marcus sighed heavily. "Not great. The interviewer, he was pretty harsh. Made some comments about my background, my qualifications. It was tough." "Oh, Marcus," Lisa said softly. "I'm so sorry. That's not right at all. You know you're amazing, right? Don't let some prejudiced jerk make you doubt yourself." Her words brought a small smile to Marcus's face. "Thanks, sis. I'm trying not to, but it's hard, you know." "I know," Lisa replied. "But remember what Mom always says, your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions." Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, she does say that a lot, doesn't she?" "Because it's true," Lisa insisted. "You're smart, capable, and kind. Any company would be lucky to have you." As they talked, Marcus felt some of the tension leaving his body. His family's unwavering support was like a balm to his wounded spirit. "Thanks, Lisa," he said, his voice stronger now. "I needed to hear that." "Anytime, bro," she replied warmly. "Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? Mom and Dad would love to see you, and we can all remind you how awesome you are." Marcus smiled, feeling a surge of love for his family. "That sounds perfect. I'll be there." As he ended the call, Marcus stood a little straighter. James's words had hurt, but they didn't define him. With his family's support and his own determination, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. James leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He glanced at his watch, noting that he still had a few more interviews to conduct. The memory of his interaction with Marcus brought a chuckle to his throat. "Well, that certainly put him in his place," James muttered to himself, shuffling the papers on his desk. As the next candidate walked in, James straightened his tie, ready to assert his dominance once more. He relished the power he held, the ability to make or break someone's career aspirations with just a few words. "Good afternoon," he said, his tone dripping with false politeness. "Please have a seat." Meanwhile, across town, Marcus found himself in a small park near his apartment. He sat on a bench watching children play on the swings and slides. Their laughter and carefree attitudes slowly began to lift his spirits. Taking a deep breath, Marcus closed his eyes and focused on his own strengths. He thought about all the challenges he'd overcome in his life, all the times he'd proven his worth, despite others' doubts. "I am capable," he whispered to himself. "I am worthy. I am more than what that man thinks of me." As he opened his eyes, Marcus noticed an elderly woman struggling with her groceries nearby. Without hesitation, he stood up and approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gently. Would you like some help with those bags?" The woman's face lit up with a grateful smile. "Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind of you." As Marcus helped her carry her groceries to her car, he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. This simple act of kindness reminded him of who he truly was, not the person James had tried to make him feel like, but a compassionate, capable individual who had much to offer the world. By the time he returned to his apartment, Marcus felt reinvigorated. He sat down at his desk and pulled out his resume, determined to continue his job search with renewed enthusiasm. "One setback doesn't define me," he said aloud, his voice firm with conviction. "I know my worth, and the right opportunity will come along. I just need to stay positive and keep believing in myself." The office was alive with a palpable energy. Whispers and excited chatter filled the air as employees gathered in small groups, their eyes darting frequently to the closed door of the conference room. Today was the day everyone had been waiting for, the announcement of the new CEO. James strolled through the corridors, his head held high, barely acknowledging the buzz around him. He smirked to himself, confident that his position in the company was secure, regardless of who would be taking the helm. "All this fuss over nothing," he muttered under his breath, rolling his eyes at a group of giggling interns. As he passed by the water cooler, he overheard snippets of conversation. "I heard it might be someone from outside the company," one employee whispered excitedly. "Really? That could mean big changes for all of us," another replied, their voice tinged with both hope and anxiety. James scoffed inwardly. Changes? He doubted that. He'd been with the company for years, had climbed the ladder through sheer determination and, in his mind, superior skills. No new CEO was going to upset the balance he'd worked so hard to create. He made his way to his office, closing the door behind him to shut out the noise. Settling into his plush leather chair, James leaned back and put his feet up on the desk. He glanced at the framed awards on his wall, reminders of his past successes and, in his mind, guarantees of his future at the company. "New CEO," he chuckled to himself. "As if that matters to me. I'm indispensable." Outside his office, the excitement continued to build. Employees speculated about what the new leadership might mean for the company culture, for their projects, for their futures. But inside his four walls, James remained untouched by the anticipation, dismissing the potential for change with a wave of his hand. The quiet hum of the office was suddenly interrupted by a chorus of pings and buzzes. Phones lit up, and computer screens flashed with notifications. An important email had just landed in everyone's inbox. James, still lounging in his office, heard the commotion outside. He furrowed his brow, wondering what could possibly be causing such a stir. With a sigh, he swiveled his chair to face his computer and clicked on the new message. His eyes widened as he read the subject line: "Grand Ceremony, introducing our new CEO." The email was short but packed with excitement. It announced a company-wide gathering in the main auditorium the following day. All employees were required to attend this special event, where the new CEO would be revealed and introduced. James felt a twinge of unease in his stomach. He hadn't expected such a grand affair. Usually these things were handled with a simple memo or a brief meeting. This felt different, bigger somehow. Outside his office, the excitement was palpable. Employees gathered in clusters, their voices a mix of hushed whispers and excited chatter. The anticipation was electric, spreading through the office like wildfire. "I can't believe they're making such a big deal out of this," James muttered to himself, trying to dismiss the growing knot in his stomach. He stepped out of his office, intending to get a coffee and clear his head. As he walked down the corridor, he couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. "Do you think it'll be someone we know?" one young intern asked eagerly. "I heard it might be an outsider, someone to shake things up," replied another employee, her eyes sparkling with excitement. James tried to maintain his air of indifference, but he felt a bead of sweat form on his brow. The idea of change, of someone new coming in and potentially disrupting the status quo, was starting to feel all too real. As he reached the break room, he found it buzzing with activity. Employees were huddled around tables, speculating about what the new CEO might bring to the company. Some looked nervous, others hopeful, but all were caught up in the suspense of the moment. James poured himself a cup of coffee with shaky hands, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of uncertainty about his place in the company. The grand ceremony loomed large in his mind, a symbol of change he wasn't sure he was ready for. The grand day had finally arrived. Employees from every department streamed into the company's space-use auditorium, their faces alight with anticipation. The air buzzed with excitement as people found their seats, whispering and speculating about who the new CEO might be. James arrived, his usual confident stride replaced by a slightly hesitant gait. He scanned the room, noting the sea of eager faces. For once, he felt out of place, unsure of where he fit in this new chapter of the company's story. The auditorium was a sight to behold. Bright banners adorned the walls, and a large screen hung above the stage, currently displaying the company logo. The stage itself was set with a podium, flanked by beautiful floral arrangements. As people settled into their seats, the noise level rose. Laughter and animated conversations filled the air. Old colleagues reunited, sharing their hopes and fears about the upcoming announcement. "I heard it might be someone from marketing," one excited voice carried across the room. "No way," another responded. "I bet it's that brilliant woman from the New York office." James found a seat near the back, preferring to observe from a distance. He couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing since yesterday's email. The lights dimmed slightly and a hush fell over the crowd. A well-dressed woman from HR stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She approached the podium with a warm smile. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and enthusiastic. "Thank you all for being here for this momentous occasion. Today, we embark on a new journey for our company, led by a visionary who will guide us into the future." The audience leaned forward in their seats, hanging on her every word. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of excitement and nervous energy pulsing through the room. Without further ado, the HR representative continued, "It is my great pleasure to introduce to you our new Chief Executive Officer." The lights dimmed further, casting the auditorium in a soft glow. A hush fell over the crowd as the company's board members filed onto the stage, their faces serious yet expectant. Each took their place in a neat row behind the podium, their presence adding weight to the moment. James stood among his colleagues, his arms crossed and a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Despite the palpable excitement around him, he remained aloof, convinced that this change wouldn't affect his position. He glanced at his watch, impatient for the ceremony to be over so he could return to his important work. "Look at them all," he muttered under his breath, eyeing his fellow employees. "Acting like this is the second coming or something." The board chairman stepped forward, his silver hair catching the spotlight. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the silent auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice commanding attention, "today marks a new chapter in our company's history. We've searched far and wide for someone who embodies our values, someone who can lead us into a brighter future." James rolled his eyes, certain that no one could do a better job than those already in charge, himself included. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, barely listening as the chairman continued to build suspense. The atmosphere in the room was electric. People held their breath, some clasping hands with their neighbors, others leaning forward in their seats. The anticipation was almost tangible, a living thing that filled the space between each person. But James remained unmoved. He stood tall, chin lifted slightly, a picture of confidence amidst the sea of nervous energy. In his mind, this was all just a show, a necessary evil in the corporate world. He was sure that once the dust settled, things would carry on as they always had, with him at the top of his game, calling the shots. The lights dimmed further and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The room fell into an expectant hush as the screen flickered to life. Soft, inspirational music filled the auditorium, and images began to dance across the screen. The highlight reel opened with a series of newspaper headlines, each one more impressive than the last. "Jung Prodigy Revolutionises Tech Industry," one read. Another proclaimed, "Innovative Leader Transforms Struggling Company into Industry Giant." As the images flashed by, employees leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with wonder. The reel showed a figure, always in motion, shaking hands with world leaders, giving rousing speeches to packed auditoriums, and standing proudly in front of gleaming corporate headquarters. Whispers of awe rippled through the crowd. "Did you see that?" one employee whispered to another. "They've worked with some of the biggest names in the industry." The music swelled as the reel showcased charity work, showing the mystery CEO building homes in developing countries and planting trees in deforested areas. Tears welled up in the eyes of many watching, touched by the depth of compassion displayed. James, still standing with his arms crossed, felt his smug smile falter. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the impressive achievements unfolding before him. For the first time that day, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. As the reel continued, it highlighted groundbreaking patents and innovations that had changed entire industries. Gasps of recognition echoed through the room as people realized the impact this person had already made on their daily lives. "I use that app every day," someone exclaimed in a hushed tone. "I had no idea it was created by our new CEO." The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to excitement and admiration. Employees sat up straighter, their faces shining with pride at the thought of working under such an accomplished leader. As the highlight reel drew to a close, the screen faded to black, leaving the audience in awe. The chairman stepped back up to the podium, a broad smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice filled with pride, "I think you'll agree that we've found someone truly exceptional to lead our company into the future." The chairman's words hung in the air for a moment, and then the screen behind him lit up once more. A familiar face filled the display, and a collective gasp echoed through the auditorium. It was Marcus Williams. The room erupted in thunderous applause. Employees leapt to their feet, cheering and clapping with unbridled enthusiasm. Some wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the unexpected turn of events. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our new CEO, Marcus Williams," the chairman announced, his voice barely audible over the commotion. Marcus stepped onto the stage, his face beaming with a mixture of pride and humility. He waved to the crowd, his eyes glistening with emotion. The applause grew even louder, and several employees began chanting his name. In the midst of the celebration, James stood frozen, his mouth agape. The color drained from his face as the reality of the situation sank in. He felt as if the ground beneath his feet had suddenly disappeared. Shock coursed through James's body. His mind raced, replaying the interview from earlier that day. The condescending remarks, the subtle jabs, the blatant disrespect, all of it came flooding back, hitting him like a tidal wave of regret. Fear gripped James's heart. What would this mean for his future at the company? He had treated the new CEO with such disdain, such unwarranted prejudice. His hands began to tremble as he contemplated the consequences of his actions. As Marcus began to speak, his words filled with gratitude and vision for the company's future. James felt a deep, gnawing regret settle in his stomach. He had judged this man so harshly, so unfairly, and now Marcus stood before them all as their leader. Tears welled up in James's eyes, not of joy like his colleagues, but of shame and remorse. He wanted to disappear, to rewind time and undo his cruel behavior. But as Marcus continued to speak with grace and authority, James knew that no such escape was possible. Marcus stepped onto the stage with a grace that belied the tumultuous emotions swirling within him. His steps were steady, his posture straight and proud. As he approached the podium, the applause gradually died down, replaced by an expectant hush. Taking a deep breath, Marcus gazed out at the sea of faces before him. His eyes, warm and kind, swept across the auditorium, briefly pausing on James's pale, shocked expression. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of Marcus's lips before he addressed the crowd. "Thank you, everyone, for this incredible welcome," Marcus began, his voice rich with sincerity. "I am deeply honored and humbled to stand before you today as your new CEO." The audience burst into another round of applause, and Marcus raised his hand gently, waiting for quiet to return. When it did, he continued, his words measured and heartfelt. First and foremost, I want to express my profound gratitude for this opportunity. To the board members who saw potential in me, to my family who has supported me through every challenge, and to each and every one of you who make this company what it is, thank you. Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping the room once more. As we embark on this new chapter together, I want to share my vision for our future. A future where innovation and compassion go hand in hand, where every voice is heard and every contribution valued. His words resonated through the auditorium, captivating his listeners. Even James, still reeling from shock, found himself hanging on to every word. Our company has always been at the forefront of progress, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger with passion. But true progress isn't just about profits or market share. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels respected, where diversity is celebrated, and where we lift each other up. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Marcus's eyes sparkled with determination as he laid out his plans for fostering inclusivity, driving innovation, and building a company culture rooted in kindness and mutual respect. As Marcus continued his speech, his voice took on a more personal tone. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, making sure he had everyone's attention. I stand here today not just as your new CEO, but as someone who has faced discrimination and prejudice throughout my life, Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. There were times when doors were closed in my face, when my abilities were questioned simply because of who I am. A hush fell over the auditorium as Marcus's words sank in. Even James, still pale and shocked, found himself leaning forward, listening intently. But I refuse to let those experiences define me, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. Instead, they fueled my determination to create a world where everyone has a fair chance, where talent and hard work are what truly matter. Marcus's eyes sparkled with conviction as he spoke. Today, I want to share a vision of a workplace where diversity is not just tolerated, but celebrated, where respect is the foundation of every interaction, and where second chances are given freely. He paused, letting his words sink in. I believe that our differences are our greatest strength. When we bring together people from all walks of life with varied experiences and perspectives, we create an environment ripe for innovation and growth. Marcus's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of various employees. I want each of you to know that you are valued here. Your voices matter, your ideas are important, and your contributions are essential to our success. As he spoke about second chances, Marcus's eyes briefly rested on James. There was no anger or resentment in his gaze, only compassion and understanding. We all make mistakes, he said softly. What matters is how we learn from them and grow. The audience hung on Marcus's every word, many nodding in agreement. Some even had tears in their eyes, moved by his sincerity and the power of his message. As we move forward together, Marcus concluded, his voice filled with hope and determination, let's commit to building a workplace where everyone feels respected, valued, and empowered to reach their full potential. Because when we lift each other up, there's no limit to what we can achieve. As Marcus concluded his speech, a wave of emotion swept through the auditorium. The employees, deeply moved by his words, rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Tears glistened in many eyes, and faces shone with admiration and hope. In the midst of the applause, James stood motionless, his mind reeling. The weight of his actions earlier that day crashed down upon him like a ton of bricks. He felt a deep, gnawing sense of remorse settling in his gut. As he watched Marcus on stage, graciously accepting the applause with a humble smile, James couldn't help but remember the cruel words he had spoken during the interview. The memory of his condescending tone and dismissive attitude made him wince. What have I done? James thought, his face flushing with shame. He looked around at his colleagues, their faces alight with excitement and inspiration, and felt utterly alone in his guilt. Marcus's words about second chances echoed in James's mind. He realized that the man he had treated so poorly just hours ago was now offering a hand of understanding to everyone, even to those who might have wronged him. James felt a lump form in his throat. The contrast between Marcus's grace and his own petty behavior was stark and humbling. He thought about all the times he had judged others based on his own biases, never considering the impact of his words or actions. As the applause began to die down, James found himself clapping too, his hands moving almost of their own accord. But it wasn't just polite applause. It was a gesture of genuine respect and admiration for the man who had shown such strength and compassion in the face of adversity. The magnitude of his previous actions hit James hard. He realized that his behavior hadn't just affected Marcus, it had contributed to a toxic work environment that stifled creativity and growth. He had been so caught up in his own sense of superiority that he had failed to see the potential in others. As Marcus stepped down from the stage, still smiling and shaking hands with board members, James felt an overwhelming urge to apologize. But he knew that a simple "sorry" wouldn't be enough. He would need to change, to actively work on becoming a better person and colleague. Marcus stood confidently at the podium, his warm smile radiating across the auditorium. He took a deep breath and began to outline his vision for the company's future. "My friends," he began, his voice strong and clear, "today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our company, a chapter filled with hope, respect, and endless possibilities." The room fell silent, everyone hanging on Marcus's every word. Even James, still reeling from his earlier behavior, found himself leaning forward, eager to hear more. "Our greatest strength lies in our diversity," Marcus continued. "Each one of you brings unique experiences, perspectives, and talents to the table. It's time we embrace these differences and use them to propel us forward." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "From this day forward, we will foster an environment where every voice is heard, where every idea is valued, and where every individual feels respected." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. Marcus's words were touching hearts and igniting hope in a way many had never experienced before in their workplace. "We will implement new training programs to promote understanding and empathy among all levels of staff," Marcus explained. "We'll create mentorship opportunities to support career growth for everyone, regardless of their background." As he spoke, Marcus's passion was palpable. His eyes sparkled with enthusiasm, and his hands moved expressively, emphasizing his points. The staff found themselves nodding along, caught up in his infectious energy. "Moreover," Marcus added, "we will establish an open-door policy. My office will always be accessible to anyone who wants to share ideas, concerns, or simply have a chat. We're in this together, and I want to hear from each and every one of you." The atmosphere in the room was electric. Employees exchanged excited glances, some wiping away tears of joy. For many, this was the first time they felt truly seen and valued in their workplace. Marcus concluded his outline with a powerful statement. "Together, we will build a company culture that not only drives success but also nurtures the human spirit. A place where we don't just work together, but grow together." As Marcus finished speaking, the room erupted into applause once again. The staff rose to their feet, their faces beaming with hope and inspiration. They could feel the winds of positive change blowing through the company, and they were ready to embrace it wholeheartedly. As the applause died down and employees began to disperse, James remained rooted to his spot, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of his earlier actions pressed heavily on his conscience, making his chest tight with shame and regret. He watched as Marcus graciously shook hands with board members and employees, his warm smile and genuine interest in each person, a stark contrast to James's own behavior earlier that day. The memory of his condescending remarks and dismissive attitude towards Marcus during the interview made James wince inwardly. Guilt gnawed at him, twisting his stomach into knots. How could he have been so blind, so arrogant? James ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence replaced by a crushing sense of remorse. As the crowd thinned, James found himself pacing in a quiet corner of the auditorium. He knew he needed to make things right, but the thought of facing Marcus filled him with dread. What could he possibly say to make up for his inexcusable behavior? James's mind raced through various scenarios. Should he approach Marcus right away and apologize? Or would it be better to write a formal letter of apology? The idea of waiting seemed unbearable. but he also feared that an immediate approach might appear insincere or self-serving. He glanced across the room, catching sight of Marcus engaged in animated conversation with a group of employees. The new CEO's easy manner and approachability only served to highlight James's own shortcomings. Taking a deep breath, James steeled himself. He knew that no matter how uncomfortable it might be, he had to face Marcus and take responsibility for his actions. It was the right thing to do, not just for his career, but for his own personal growth. With trembling hands, James straightened his tie and took a tentative step towards Marcus. His heart pounded in his chest and his mouth felt dry. He had no idea how Marcus would react, but he knew he had to try. It was time to swallow his pride and make amends. James took a deep breath and approached Marcus, who was still engaged in conversation with a group of employees. His heart raced as he waited for a pause in the discussion. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams," James said, his voice wavering slightly. "Could I have a moment of your time, please?" Marcus turned to James, his expression neutral but not unkind. "Of course, Mr. Cooper. What can I do for you?" James swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his earlier actions pressing down on him. "I was hoping we could speak privately, sir. There's something important I need to discuss with you." Marcus nodded, excusing himself from the group. He led James to a quiet corner of the auditorium, away from prying eyes and ears. "What's on your mind, Mr. Cooper?" Marcus asked, his tone professional but open. James felt a lump form in his throat. He took another deep breath, willing himself to meet Marcus's gaze. "Sir, I owe you a sincere apology. My behavior during your interview was completely unacceptable. I was prejudiced, arrogant, and disrespectful. I'm deeply ashamed of how I treated you, and I want you to know that I recognize how wrong I was." Marcus listened quietly, his expression softening as James spoke. "I understand if you can't forgive me," James continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that I'm committed to changing. I'd like to request your guidance on how I can improve and contribute positively to the inclusive environment you envision for our company." James paused, his heart pounding as he awaited Marcus's response. He felt vulnerable and exposed, but also relieved to have taken this first step towards redemption. Marcus studied James for a moment, his eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and thoughtfulness. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Cooper," he said finally. "I appreciate you coming to me with this. It takes courage to admit when we've made mistakes." James felt a glimmer of hope at Marcus's words. He waited, eager to hear what else the new CEO might say. Marcus took a moment to collect his thoughts, his eyes never leaving James's face. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken emotions. "Mr. Cooper," Marcus began, his voice calm and measured, "I won't pretend that your actions during the interview didn't hurt me. They did. But I've faced discrimination before, and I've learned that holding on to anger only hurts myself." James nodded, his eyes downcast with shame. "I understand, sir. I can't imagine how my words must have made you feel." Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "What's important now is not what happened in the past, but what we do moving forward. Your willingness to admit your mistakes and seek change is a good start." James looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I truly want to be better. I've never felt so ashamed of myself, and I know I need to change." "Change isn't easy," Marcus said, his tone softening. "It requires constant effort and self-reflection. Are you prepared for that?" James nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to be part of the inclusive environment you're creating, not an obstacle to it." Marcus smiled slightly, the first real warmth he'd shown James since their initial meeting. "That's good to hear, Mr. Cooper. I believe in second chances, and I'm willing to give you one." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, sir. I promise I won't let you down." "I hope not," Marcus replied. "But remember, this isn't just about me or your job. It's about becoming a better person and creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected." James nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir, and I'm truly grateful for this opportunity. What would you like me to do first?" Marcus listened intently to James's words, his eyes reflecting a mix of compassion and cautious optimism. As James finished speaking, Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Cooper," Marcus began, his voice steady and kind, "I appreciate your sincerity and your willingness to acknowledge your mistakes. It takes courage to face one's own shortcomings, and I commend you for taking this step." James nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly at Marcus's words. "I believe that everyone deserves a chance to grow and improve," Marcus continued, "and I think you've shown genuine remorse and a desire to change. With that in mind, I'm willing to give you an opportunity to prove yourself." James's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I promise I won't let you down." Marcus smiled gently. "I have a proposal for you, Mr. Cooper. I'd like you to lead a new project focused on diversity and inclusion within our company." James's mouth fell open in shock. "Me? But sir, after what I did..." Marcus held up a hand to stop him. "Precisely because of what you did, Mr. Cooper. You've experienced firsthand the negative impact of prejudice and discrimination. Who better to lead this initiative than someone who understands the need for change on a personal level?" James swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know what to say, sir. This is more than I deserve." "It's not about what you deserve, Mr. Cooper," Marcus said firmly. "It's about what you can do to make our workplace better for everyone. This project will be challenging. You'll need to confront your own biases, listen to others' experiences, and work hard to implement real change. Are you up for it?" James straightened in his chair, a look of determination crossing his face. "Yes, sir, I am. I want to do this, not just for my own redemption, but for the good of the company and all our employees." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear. We'll start planning the project next week. In the meantime, I want you to reflect on your experiences and start thinking about how we can create a more inclusive environment." James dove into his new role with a mixture of determination and trepidation. The weight of his past actions hung heavy on his shoulders, but he was committed to proving himself worthy of the second chance Marcus had given him. As he began researching diversity and inclusion initiatives, James quickly realized how much he had to learn. He pored over articles, watched countless videos, and even reached out to experts in the field. Each new piece of information opened his eyes to the experiences of others, experiences he had previously dismissed or ignored. The first team meeting for the project was a nerve-wracking experience for James. He stood at the front of the conference room, acutely aware of the skeptical glances from his colleagues. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "I know many of you are surprised to see me leading this initiative," James said, his voice slightly shaky. "To be honest, I'm surprised too. But I'm here because I've realized how much I need to change and how much our company needs to change." As James shared his vision for the project, he noticed a shift in the room. The initial skepticism began to give way to curiosity and even cautious enthusiasm. By the end of the meeting, several team members approached him with ideas and offers to help. Over the next few weeks, James threw himself into the work. He organized focus groups, conducted surveys, and met with employees from all levels of the company. Each conversation challenged his preconceptions and pushed him to think differently. One particularly difficult day, James found himself struggling with a wave of guilt and self-doubt. He wondered if he was really the right person for this job. As he sat at his desk, head in his hands, he heard a gentle knock on his office door. Looking up, he saw Marcus standing in the doorway, a concerned expression on his face. "Everything all right, Mr. Cooper?" Marcus asked, stepping into the office. James sighed heavily. "I'm trying, sir. I really am. But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing more harm than good. Maybe someone else would be better suited for this." Marcus sat down across from James, his eyes kind but firm. "Mr. Cooper, change is never easy. But the fact that you're struggling, that you're questioning yourself, that's a good thing. It means you're growing." James nodded slowly, feeling a glimmer of hope at Marcus's words. "Keep pushing forward," Marcus continued. "Your journey is an important part of this project. It shows that real change is possible, even in the most unlikely places. With renewed determination, James thanked Marcus and turned back to his work. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on. As the weeks passed, Marcus began to take a more active role in mentoring James. He recognized the genuine effort James was making and decided to provide the guidance and support needed to ensure the success of both James and the diversity initiative. One afternoon, Marcus invited James to his office for a check-in meeting. James entered, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "Have a seat, Mr. Cooper," Marcus said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "How's the project coming along?" James sat down, straightening his tie. "It's challenging, sir, but I'm learning so much. I never realized how complex these issues are." Marcus nodded, a small smile on his face. "That's a good start, James. Recognizing the complexity is the first step towards real understanding." Over the next hour, Marcus listened intently as James shared his progress, challenges, and ideas. He offered advice, drawing from his own experiences and expertise. James found himself hanging on every word, grateful for the wisdom Marcus was sharing. "You know, James," Marcus said thoughtfully, "when I first met you, I never imagined we'd be having this conversation. But I'm impressed by your willingness to change and grow." James felt a surge of pride at Marcus's words. "Thank you, sir. I'm trying my best to make amends and do right by the company and my colleagues." As their meetings became more frequent, James found himself looking forward to these sessions with Marcus. He began to see Marcus not just as his boss, but as a mentor and role model. During one particularly productive meeting, Marcus surprised James with a suggestion. "I think it's time we expanded your role in this initiative, James. How would you feel about presenting our progress at the next board meeting?" James's eyes widened. "Really, you think I'm ready for that?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious but encouraging. "I do. You've shown remarkable growth, James. Your perspective and journey are valuable parts of this story." As James left Marcus's office that day, he felt a newfound sense of confidence and purpose. He realized that he had not only gained Marcus's respect, but had also found a mentor who believed in his ability to change and make a difference. Under Marcus's leadership, the company began to undergo a remarkable transformation. The once tense and competitive atmosphere gradually shifted into one of collaboration and mutual respect. Employees who had previously felt overlooked or undervalued now found themselves being heard and appreciated. One of the first changes Marcus implemented was an open-door policy. He encouraged all employees, regardless of their position, to share their ideas and concerns directly with him. This simple act made a world of difference. People who had once felt invisible now felt seen and valued. Mara, a junior analyst who had been considering leaving the company, was amazed by the change. "It's like night and day," she confided to her colleague. "I actually look forward to coming to work now." Marcus also introduced regular team-building activities and workshops focused on diversity and inclusion. These sessions helped break down barriers between departments and fostered a sense of unity among the staff. The physical workspace underwent changes too. Marcus had the drab, gray cubicles replaced with more open, colorful spaces that encouraged collaboration. He also created comfortable break areas where employees could relax and recharge. James, still working diligently on the diversity initiative, noticed the positive impact these changes were having. He overheard conversations in the hallways and break rooms, filled with enthusiasm and optimism about the company's future. "Did you see the new mentorship program Marcus announced?" one employee asked excitedly. "Yes, I've already signed up. It's amazing to think we'll have the chance to learn from senior staff," another replied. As the weeks turned into months, the company's productivity began to soar. Employees were more engaged, creative, and motivated. The increased job satisfaction was reflected in their work, leading to innovative solutions and improved client relationships. Marcus's leadership style, focused on empowering his team and fostering a positive work culture, was paying off in tangible ways. The company's reputation in the industry began to improve, attracting top talent and new clients. As the weeks passed, James's project on diversity and inclusion began to bear fruit. The once arrogant manager found himself deeply invested in the initiative, pouring his heart and soul into making it a success. He organized workshops, created mentorship programs, and implemented new hiring practices that focused on diversity and equal opportunity. At first, some employees were skeptical of James's involvement, given his past behavior. But as they saw his genuine efforts and commitment, their attitudes began to change. James worked tirelessly to prove himself, often staying late at the office to fine-tune his proposals and presentations. One day, as James was presenting the project's progress to the board, he noticed Marcus nodding approvingly. The sight filled him with a warm sense of accomplishment. For the first time in his career, James felt proud not because of his status or power, but because he was making a real positive difference. The results of James's efforts were becoming evident throughout the company. Employee satisfaction surveys showed a marked improvement in workplace culture. People from diverse backgrounds were being hired and promoted based on their merits, creating a more vibrant and innovative work environment. James overheard two employees chatting by the water cooler. "You know, I never thought I'd say this," one of them said. "But James's diversity program has really changed things around here. I feel like I belong now." These words touched James deeply. He realized that his work was not just about numbers and statistics. It was about people's lives and their sense of worth. The feeling of contributing to something greater than himself was indescribable. As James walked back to his office, he caught his reflection in a glass partition. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. Gone was the smug, self-important expression he once wore. In its place was a look of humility and genuine happiness. For the first time in years, James felt truly proud of himself, not because he was better than others, but because he was helping to make the workplace better for everyone. He sat at his desk, a small smile playing on his lips, ready to tackle the next challenge in his journey of redemption and growth. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus and James found themselves spending more time together outside of work. What had started as a professional mentorship slowly blossomed into a genuine friendship. One evening, after a long day at the office, Marcus invited James to join him for dinner at a small, family-owned restaurant near the company building. James, surprised but pleased by the invitation, readily accepted. As they sat across from each other, surrounded by the warm glow of the restaurant's soft lighting, Marcus smiled. "You know, James, I never thought we'd be here like this when we first met." James chuckled, a hint of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Neither did I. I'm still amazed by how much has changed." Over steaming plates of comfort food, they began to share stories from their pasts. Marcus spoke about growing up in a working-class neighborhood, the challenges he faced, and the people who believed in him along the way. There was this librarian, Mrs. Thompson, Marcus recalled, his eyes twinkling with fond memory. "She always saved the new business books for me, even though I was just a kid. She'd say, 'Marcus, one day you're going to run your own company.' I never believed her then, but look at me now." James listened intently, feeling a mix of admiration and regret for his past judgments. When it was his turn, he opened up about his privileged upbringing and the pressure he always felt to succeed. "I was taught that success meant being better than everyone else," James confessed. "It's taken me this long to realize how wrong that was." As they talked, they discovered unexpected commonalities. Both had a passion for jazz music, and both had dreamed of becoming pilots when they were young. They laughed at shared jokes and nodded in understanding at each other's struggles. With each story exchanged, the walls between them crumbled further. Marcus saw the vulnerability behind James's former arrogance, while James gained a deeper appreciation for Marcus's resilience and wisdom. As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted from past experiences to future hopes. They discussed their visions for the company and their personal goals, finding that their ideas often complemented each other. "You know, Marcus," James said, leaning back in his chair, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that terrible interview. It led me here, to this moment, and I wouldn't change it for anything." Marcus reached across the table, patting James's arm. "Life has a funny way of teaching us its most important lessons, doesn't it?" The company's grand ballroom buzzed with excitement as employees gathered for the annual celebration. This year was special. marking not just another successful year, but also the incredible transformation the company had undergone under Marcus's leadership. The room was beautifully decorated with twinkling lights and elegant floral arrangements. Laughter and animated chatter filled the air as colleagues mingled, their faces beaming with genuine happiness and pride. Marcus stood near the entrance, greeting each employee with a warm smile and a firm handshake. His presence radiated a calm confidence that put everyone at ease. James stood beside him, helping to welcome the guests and looking more comfortable in his own skin than he ever had before. As the evening progressed, it was time for speeches. The board chairman took the stage first, praising the company's achievements and growth. Then, with a proud smile, he invited Marcus to address the crowd. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, his eyes scanning the room filled with faces he'd come to know and care for. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice warm and sincere. "When I first joined this company, I had a vision of what we could become, but the reality has far exceeded my wildest dreams, and that's all thanks to each and every one of you." He went on to highlight specific achievements, praising teams and individuals for their hard work and dedication. The room hung on his every word, nodding and smiling in agreement. Then, Marcus did something unexpected. He called James to the stage. "I want to give special recognition to James Cooper," Marcus said, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "James has shown us all what it means to grow, to learn, and to become a better version of oneself. His work on our diversity and inclusion initiatives has been nothing short of transformative." James stood there, visibly moved by Marcus's words. The room erupted in applause, many employees rising to their feet in a standing ovation. James's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he looked out at his colleagues, seeing not judgment but genuine appreciation and respect. As the applause died down, employees began to approach Marcus and James, expressing their gratitude personally. Some shared stories of how the new inclusive policies had positively impacted their lives, while others simply wanted to thank them for creating such a positive work environment. As the celebration continued around him, James found a quiet corner of the ballroom to catch his breath and reflect. He leaned against the wall, his eyes scanning the room filled with happy faces and genuine camaraderie. It was a sight that not too long ago he would have dismissed as unnecessary sentimentality. But now, it filled his heart with warmth and gratitude. James's mind wandered back to that fateful day when he had first met Marcus. He cringed inwardly, remembering his arrogant and dismissive behavior during the interview. The shame of that moment still stung, but it was overshadowed by the immense gratitude he felt for Marcus's forgiveness and guidance. He watched as Marcus moved through the crowd, greeting everyone with the same kindness and respect, regardless of their position in the company. James marveled at how much he had learned from Marcus's example. The man he used to be, judgmental, prejudiced, and cold, seemed like a stranger now. A wave of emotion washed over James as he thought about the journey he had been on. The diversity and inclusion project that Marcus had entrusted him with had been challenging, forcing James to confront his own biases and preconceptions. But with each obstacle overcome, each mind opened, including his own, James had felt a growing sense of purpose. Now, looking at the fruits of their labor, a company transformed, colleagues who genuinely cared for one another, and a work environment where everyone felt valued, James felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that this was what true success felt like, not the hollow superiority he used to cling to, but the genuine satisfaction of making a positive difference in people's lives. James's eyes met Marcus's across the room, and Marcus gave him a warm smile and a nod. In that simple gesture, James saw the trust and respect he had earned. He felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the second chance Marcus had given him, a chance not just to keep his job, but to become a better person. As the celebration began to wind down, Marcus made his way through the thinning crowd towards James. Their eyes met, and both men smiled warmly. They had come so far from that first tense encounter in the interview room. James straightened up as Marcus approached, feeling a mix of respect and friendship that he never thought possible on that fateful day. Marcus extended his hand, and James took it without hesitation. "James," Marcus said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I want to thank you for everything you've done. Your work on the diversity project has been incredible." James felt a lump in his throat. "Marcus, I should be thanking you. You gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. You've taught me so much." They shook hands firmly, their grip a testament to the strength of their newfound friendship. As they stood there, symbolizing a new era for the company, employees around them noticed the moment. Smiles spread across faces and a ripple of warmth seemed to flow through the room. Marcus placed his other hand on James's shoulder. "This is what it's all about, James. Second chances, growth, understanding. Look around us. We've created something beautiful here." James nodded, taking in the scene. Colleagues from all backgrounds were mingling, laughing, and sharing stories. The walls that once divided them had crumbled, replaced by bridges of mutual respect and appreciation. "I never thought I could change," James admitted softly. "But you showed me it was possible. You've changed this whole company, Marcus." Marcus shook his head, smiling. "We did it together, James. All of us. That's the power of giving people a chance to grow and learn." As they stood there, hand in hand, smiling at each other and the bright future ahead, the entire room seemed to glow with hope and possibility. It was a powerful reminder that with understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to change, anything was possible. Would you have forgiven James if you were in Marcus's position? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel. I am spending hours upon hours writing these heartwarming stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going.